So someone in small group was talking about the I am sense and how that relates to the deeper insight of non-dual, or the pure sense experience without a subject and object. Essentially, that was the question. But it's also along the lines of the meditation I did this morning. And it's along the lines of a lot of conversations we've been having on Q&A. We're kind of in that territory. So I thought I'd read something that I think is really poignant. This comes from Awakening to Reality. It's written by a guy named John Tan. And he describes stages of his experience of realization. And this is called stage 4. Stage 4 is he calls the presence as mirror, bright clarity. I got in touch with Buddhism in 1997, not because I wanted to find out more about the experience of presence, but rather the teaching of impermanence synced deeply with what I was experiencing in life. I was faced with the possibility of losing all my wealth and more by financial crisis. At that point in time, I had no idea Buddhism is so profoundly rich on the aspect of presence. The mystery of life cannot be understood. I sought for refuge in Buddhism to alleviate my sorrows caused by the financial crisis, but it turned out to be the missing key toward experiencing total presence. Previous to this, he had talked about the experience of total presence, but it was fleeting. It wouldn't stay. It came and went all the time. I wasn't that resistant to the doctrine of no self, but the idea that all phenomenal existence is empty of an inherent self, or capital S self, did not quite get into me. Were they talking about the self as a personality, or self as eternal witness? Must we do away even with the witness? Was the witness itself another illusion? And this is what the question was about in the small group today. Here's the stanza. There is thinking, no thinker. There is sound, no hearer. Suffering exists, no sufferer. Deeds there are, no doer. I was meditating on the meaning of the above stanza deeply until one day suddenly I heard tong, a bell sound. It was so clear there was nothing else, just the sound and nothing else. Tong, resounding. It was so clear, so vivid. The experience was so familiar, so real, and so clear. It was the same experience of I am. It was without thought, without concepts, without an intermediary, without anyone there, without any in between. What was it? It was presence. But this time it was not I am. It was not asking who am I. It was not the pure sense of I am. It was tong, that pure sound. Then came taste, and just the taste and nothing else. The heartbeats, the scenery. There was no gap in between, no longer a few months gap for it to arise. There was never a stage to enter, nor no I to cease, and never had it existed. There is no entry and exit point. There is no sound out there or in here. There is no I apart from arising and ceasing. The manifold of presence, moment to moment presence unfolds. This is the beginning of seeing through no self. Insight into no self has arisen, but non-dual experience is still very Brahman rather than shunyata. In fact, it is even more Brahman now than ever. Now I amness is experienced in all. Nevertheless, it is very important, key phase where the practitioner experiences a quantum leap in perceptual untying the dualistic knot. This is also the key insight leading to the realization. I went backwards. This is the key insight to leading to the realization that all is mind. All is just this one reality. The tendency to extrapolate an ultimate reality or universal consciousness where we are part of this reality remains surprisingly strong. Effectively, the dualistic knot is gone, but the bond of seeing things inherently isn't. Dualistic and inherent knots that prevent the full experiencing of our maha, empty, and non-dual nature of pristine awareness are two very different perceptual spells that bind. Yeah, it goes on. That's stage 4. He goes on to stage 5, 6, and 7 too, by the way. But that's kind of the connection. If you experience that sense of I am, and some people have a very pristine, bright, clear experience of I am. If you don't, it doesn't matter. It's okay. You don't need it. Many people don't. But if you do, or if you have a way of leading yourself back, often through meditation, to that experience of pure being, to me, it was more like pure knowing without an object of knowing. Or the Dzogchen, I think, has a term, knowingness. I like that. That's what it feels like. It's like, I talk about it mechanistically. The mind has this reflective capacity where it like tries to take a snapshot of the sense fields, but the snapshot is inherently flawed because it's a reflection. But it's a, I guess, somewhat accurate reflection. It's a reflection that seems to make it something continuous and real and solid, but that's just the reflection. But that's the first movement of mind, is that reflection of reality, right? That reflection of what seems like this world. And what this pure knowingness is, once it's recognized and realized, is to actually sort of turn that lens of awareness or attention or consciousness back on itself and realize that consciousness stands on its own with or without an object of consciousness. Some people, again, experience that as just the pure sense of I am, an undeniable sense of I am that requires no validation, or the sense of being that requires no validation. It's self-validating. It's more real than anything you had taken to be real before. This is what dawns with an awakening, essentially. So then how do you sort of go from that to non-dual? How do you go from actually having that lens or that light of perception turned in on itself such that there's just infinite light, to seeing what it's actually trying to reflect? Not seeing, but realizing, because at that point there's no seeing anymore. There's just the seen. In consciousness, there's seeing and the seen, right? In consciousness, there's the feeling and the felt. It's not a place, it's not a thing or a state, but let's call it non-dual realization. The sound is primary, and the sound is not only primary, it's everything. There's no remainder. There's no beginning or end to the sound. There's no need to put a purpose or meaning on the sound. It would be ridiculous. It's that real. It's more real than anything could be. It's more real than anything could be, I would say. It's real beyond experience. It's not subject to the limitations of experience, which require time, space, and an agent, essentially. So that's what we're called to do, I suppose, between awakening and what we call non-dual. And there's a lot of ways to approach it, and sometimes it just happens. Like for many people, they just are they're in such a path of surrender that it just keeps breaking open. Things keep dissolving, things keep dissolving, things keep dissolving. Identities keep, disintegrating. And then the non-dual clarity just presents itself. Often it's like just obvious. All of a sudden, you can't not see it. I interviewed Tony a while back on my channel, and he was at the Art of Living retreat last November, and it happened to him during the retreat. And it was simple, obvious, but it didn't go away. I mean, it's just, once it clicks, it's there. And you see, hear, feel, taste things as they are, let's say. And in that taste, smell, visual experience, there's no things. It's not, the world of objects is seen through. The illusion of objects is gone, essentially. There's other approaches, like the fetter approaches. You can kind of deconstruct it, starting with a sixth fetter, which is the subject object that I talked about yesterday. I like to encourage people to just use their natural curiosity. What are you naturally curious about? So in the small group, Chris gave I think a really good answer, and it was, the experience of the I am sense and the experience of sound, like, are they really two things? What makes it seem like there's a dividing line there, And that kind of approach where you just sort of behold the experience fully without probing at it, but with a sort of curiosity, is there anything more than the experience there? Like a boundary, like a this and a that, like a dividing line, like an entry and exit point. Just kind of beholding the experience fully without trying to make it into some idealized experience, because that'll put you in thought right away. That works. It works well. But you got to find your natural curiosity. You have to find some curiosity there. Now, if this is all intellectual for you, by the way, at this point, don't worry about it. Go for the I am sense. Go for the self-inquiry, But at this stage of things, self-inquiry is kind of becomes meaningless. It's more like inquiry into the nature of presence itself. Also, the mind, the thoughts they'll sort of try to co-opt this in a lot of ways, like even as you're sort of approaching in this way I'm describing, right, just dropping into the senses, the mechanism of mind is still operating. So it's still trying to take pictures and snapshots, and that's not a problem. Where the challenge arises is how sticky those are for you, how enticed you are to go figure out what the snapshot says. And and then take a position in relation to the snapshot of the mind. Like, it shouldn't be there, it should be there. It's got to go away for me to wake up. Like, you're just already on the mind road when you're thinking that way. But if you can pick up the flavor of doubt, recognize that that's really doubt, then it's helpful. If you're feeling doubt, then you're just noticing a thought, right? And that's okay. Just turn your attention back to the senses. It's really simple. So no thought can make non-dual not be non-dual. No identity can make non-dual be not to be non-dual. Meaning the nature of presence as it actually is unperturbed by 1,000 thoughts, by 1,000,000 thoughts, by 7 billion people with 1,000,000 thoughts each. It's still just there. It's just what it is. It's very simple. It's always available to you. This, actually, a bit of an aside, I guess, is why occasionally someone will want to sort of argue with me on my channel or something about whether enlightenment's really available to anybody, whether this is really available to anybody. And usually what I feel is they're arguing for their own limitation because they're scared of it. Like, they've been messing around with spirituality and all of a sudden it got real scary and they want to say, oh, I can't wake up, But of course, this is true for everyone. Everybody's staring directly into infinity right now. Right. So how much attention do you pay to it, and how much attention do you pay to your thoughts? That's all it really comes down to. That's all it comes down to, truly. Right. But when your experience has been, let's just say, conditioned by the flavor of thought, then it feels like that's where you need to go. It feels like you need a reference thought to see if you're okay, a reference thought to see if you're doing it right, reference thought to like some kind of parent that you're overly dependent on or something. But you don't need that for this at all. You need simple curiosity, innocence, your physical apparatus, the senses. That's all that you need. It's right there. So enjoy it. Don't keep looking for permission from your mind, because you'll never get it. Or if it tells you it's giving you permission, it's really just sucking you into some doubt stream. So in the guided meditation I did today, I was kind of pointing to the synesthetic aspect of non-duality. It may be clear, or it may be waxing and waning for people, depending on what's going on. But if you look without agenda, if you look without a watcher, which means you just let the sensation the sounds and the landscape overtake everything. So there's just the environment. There's only environment. That if you can just allow that for a moment. It's usually pretty obvious that the sensations and the sounds are not in two separate containers. You can explore this anytime. You can do it right now. The soundscape of this environment. Move your attention to the senses in your feet or hands or wherever you're called to put your attention in your body. Just the sense field, the sensation itself, the pure sensation. And if it, occasionally I will talk to someone who's like, I don't even know what that means. What do you, like, they literally don't know what I mean by sensation of the body. And I'll say, touch your skin, like rub your hand on your skin, that's the sensation. Now move inward, see if you could feel inward and see, do you have like a sort of glowing sensation within the torso and the chest? And everybody has it, but sometimes we're very conditioned to turn our attention completely away from it into thought, right? Into doubt. So sometimes you have to do these things to just get your attention back there. Like yesterday when we were doing the movement practice, Nando had us pounding on ourselves to increase the shimmer, which does work. I've never even thought of that or tried it. But what also works is just put your attention there. And then when your mind goes, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Okay, there's a thought. Put your attention back there. And then your mind says, oh, I don't know. Is that the right thing, or am I imagining something? It's another thought. Put your attention back in the sensations. Just practice that. Just keep doing it, and it'll get clearer and clearer and clearer. Anything you practice is going to get clearer, really, as long as you're actually practicing it and not practicing thinking about it. So yeah, the sensations in the hands right now, sensations in the feet, in the belly, the chest, shoulders, neck, head, all of it, the totality of sensation. And then just move your attention to the birds. Did you actually go somewhere? Did something cross a boundary or a line to get there? Is there something called attention that actually moved there? Or is it just sort of like birds, sensations, birds in an ocean of presence? And for a lot of people, maybe most people, the visual part of it seems to be a little trickier. But if you're willing to really just see, or really just experience what is seen, it's actually not any different than the sound and sensation. There's nothing about the visual sense itself that is more slippery or trickier or harder. It's the overlay. I think there's more overlay. There's more mental overlay onto the visual field that makes it feel like a distance. That specifically is probably why the sixth fetter type of exercises work well for that. When it feels like you're always at a distance from everything, there's always a space between you and everything around you. But again, if you just go to the visual experience, not to a mental image or processing that says, that's out there, I'm in here, that's out there, I'm in here, I'm in here, I'm in here, I feel it here, I feel it here, I feel it here. Like, that's just mental processing. Let's go back to the visual experience. Where's that? Is it there? Is it here? And even just a simple exercise that can be helpful to align your perception, realign your perception, is like, I don't actually know the steps of the headless way. I just know the general idea of it. But the gist of it, I think, or the way I would say it, is just look at something, and if you're perceiving like a face or a body or anything, it's like, but where is that? You're not actually seeing it. It has to be a thought, right? You don't see your own head. So why do you think there is one? That's kind of what the headless way is, I think. But the truth of it is, in the visual experience, in the scene, there really is only the scene. It's not a stage of experience, and it's not a fleeting experience. There really is only the scene and the scene. That's what the Buddhist Pali Canon text called the Bahya Sutta says. So in the scene, there's only the scene. Now, if that's just not clear, or if it's just really hard to get a taste of that, that's okay. Just go back to the sound and then the sensation. Where is it? Where is that sensation? And if it's without a thought, it's not in a specific location, right? But it's also not absent for sure. It's rather present. And that's great. It's teaching you the texture of pure experience, which is not in any specific place and not in a dualistic arrangement with an imaginary subject. At the same time, as it's not anywhere specific and it's not in a dualistic arrangement, it's rather intimate, rather alive, tactile, joyful, exuberant, clear, free of fabrication. That's the sound. It's there for you all the time. That's the sensation. Now, look at the scene. Look at what's seen. It might look like red or white. It might look like a shape or a chair. And then just subtract those interpretations. And notice without the interpretations, it's still there. It's still experienced. Look at something white and then just eliminate the interpretation called white. It doesn't go away. It's still there. What is it? Oh, I know it's a chair. Okay, well, just set the interpretation of chair aside. It's still there. The experience is still there. You can say it's got this kind of shape and whatever. Okay, we'll set the shape aside, and it's still there. And as you do this, you may notice it gets even more alive in a way, more poignant, the experience of it. It may feel almost like it's reaching out to you, or it's like an oceanic experience where it's not as obvious that there's a subject back here. It's just that sense. And then that's the sort of final piece is, does it feel like it's over there? If you just take away the idea of over there and over here, just set those ideas aside and keep looking at what's happening, it sure doesn't have anything there that would suggest it's over there or over here. That's not in the experience. So what is it? It's just that. It's the pure experience. And what's funny about it is it has like we were talking about samadhi, like deep meditative states that we can get into at retreats or even not at retreats. And it's funny because it has a certain quality that feels like that deep samadhi, but wide awake. There's a profound, poignant depth to experience when there's not an experiencer dirtying it up. And it's available always and everywhere, in all settings, all situations. So yeah, enlightenment is already the case, and it's already available, and it's already everywhere. And you can't find it. It's right in front of your face. You can't be away from it. It's right in front of your face. You can't have more or less of it. It's right in front of your nose. There's no teacher that's better or worse at showing it to you because it's already very obvious to you, actually. It's so obvious that we overlook it in a way. But there's a subtle and very poignant depth to the experience of it. It being the pure sound right now, the pure sensation right now, the pure movement right now. So take it all in. Take in the whole scene without picking out objects or thinking about people here, no people there, some people there, people walking around back there, birds over here. Just take it all in without any interpretation. Take it all in without any effort to hold yourself back from experience with thought. Take it all in without applying meaning to any aspect of it, and without imposing value on aspects of it. Like, I know that person, I don't know that person, I like that person, I don't like that person, I like to sit over there, I don't like to sit over there. Just take all of that, just set aside all of that imposition of values onto everything that the mind is always doing. Just set it aside. The mind does that stuff, it doesn't matter. What do you see? What do you actually see? What's actually seen? What's there? And you don't need a word for it, by the way. I'm not expecting you to like summarize it. Just know it directly. And when the scene, that which is seen non-dualistically, without space, radically intimate, is also felt, then the non-dual experience gets very deep and rather, radiant, luminous. The sense of the body without a body and the sense of the visual display without a world is just appearing out of nothing as this possibly radiant experience. Nothing can be more intimate. There's no way to have more intimacy than that. It's thoroughgoing intimacy. And it's one sound of a bird. It's the sound of the bird. One bird call. One sensation of your hand touching anything. One breath has that full, as Dogen called it, total exertion. Everything, all of existence, all of the energy, all the forces of the universe coming forth to create one breath, one sensation. So one experience is not apart from the whole, from the totality. One experience is the totality. It's not like we're all in this interconnected world. No, one experience is the totality. The totality is appearing as sound, sensation, movement, voice, color, form, shape, and it's just disappearing just as fast. That's what total exertion is. But it's not imagined. What I'm talking about isn't that something you imagine. It's clearly and directly known in and of itself, without a knower, without a separate one, without a witness. It's getting hot in here, isn't it? It's also the heat, by the way. How much time do we have? 18 minutes. And I just always remind again and again, if the mind is spinning on this, if the mind is going, man, I really just don't get this. I can't wait till it happens to me. So, it sounds really cool. I had that once. One time I had a little bit of that. If your mind's doing that, right? It's fine. Just pat it on the head. Put your attention right back into the senses. It's the reason I often point again and again to how simple this is because I want to just clarify that the mind doesn't really like simple. It just doesn't. It likes complexity. It likes problems. It likes pushing and pulling. It likes elaborate relational problems and issues and challenges and things to think about. And that's just the value system of the mind. It's okay. That's what it does, right? If you're a hammer, everything's a nail. If you're a mind, everything's a thought and everything's a problem and everything needs a solution, right? But it gets exhausting after a while. And that maybe you don't need problems or solutions. You don't need solutions when you realize you really don't have problems. And you can live like that. Trust me, it's possible. So, always just keep a little bit of alertness that, when you're getting really heady with this stuff, putting it in time, like, oh, that's going to be great when that happens. Yeah, it's okay. Just relax that, that grip on thought and just come back to the sense fields, sensation, visual experience. And as we started this talk with, if you have the realization of that I am sense, or you have the realization of pure being, or maybe you don't have a name for it, unbound consciousness, the ability to reflect the light of consciousness back on itself and experience infinite consciousness, then if the mind just will not stop, right? Thought. Like you feel like I'm identified with thoughts all day long, right? You're really not. I mean, only I ever was. I pretty much was, I feel like, before awakening. But yeah, I think a lot of people really live in thoughts most of the day. But even then, there's still a lot of gaps. You just don't notice them, right? But if you're really just wound up in thoughts, wound up in your head, and you have that insight, and you've had that shift, you've had that awakening, then really do spend some time as a meditative practice in the I am sense. Find your way to lead yourself back to it, in the sense of being, in the sense of pure knowing or knowingness, however you experience it. That pure experience of sort of aliveness and being that requires no validation. If you have a way of meditating in that, finding your way back to it immediately, or it's just spontaneous, spending a good amount of time in that can be really helpful. And you may have to do that for quite a while before the polarities calm down enough to really start to see what I mean when I talk about, just the seen, just the heard, just the felt. So as a practice, I think that's very valuable. It does calm the polarities of the mind and of thought. If you haven't had that experience, you haven't had a shift at all, and you feel like working in the senses, that's fine. I don't tell people not to do anything that they're deeply resonant with or that they really feel inclined to do. But I just say if this is really hard and just gets very heady for you and it doesn't make any sense, and you haven't had a shift in identity, I would work with self-inquiry or some form of self-inquiry, or one-pointed approach, or MOO. Like I have a whole playlist called Approaches to Awakening or Awakening Approaches. But this sense stuff we've been talking about is kind of deeper realization, especially like really having a true non-dual realization shift where it doesn't reverse. Often takes years, but it is available to everyone. But if it just doesn't make any sense and you're just up in your head listening to this stuff, then really work with the pointers to First Awakening, which also is very simple. But it's a different kind of focus essentially. In fact, the passage I read at the beginning by John from Awakening to Reality, I think he said in his first stage or one of his stages, I think after his first stage, when he realized the I am sense, he said he could always lead himself back to it with like a simple phrase. And it was something like, anywhere and everywhere there is, that is me. It was just obvious. So he could just remember that or use that phrase and lead himself right back to the I am sense. So you may find something like that for you that just works. Like you can just have a way of pointing your attention back to it and then just settle into it and then use that as a meditative practice. The challenge with the I am sense or that pure being is it's very easily disturbed. It's much easier in quiet meditation and retreats. It's much more difficult to do as you're like moving through the world, because it requires a very relaxed mind, in a sense, or it utilizes a relaxed mind. And until realization is really, really matured, it's very hard to have a calm mind when you're engaged in cognitive activity, talking to people, solving problems. It's tricky because the mind gets revved up and it stays revved up, and then you have to go sit and let it calm down and all that. So, but that's what that's for. That's what the I am sense practice is for. Resting in the I am sense, resting in the capital S self, resting in pure knowingness. That practice is to just acclimatize you to that sort of non-dual, non-polarized, undifferentiated experience, that oceanic experience of consciousness. And when things soften and kind of calm, and you're less likely to get lost in polarities and pushing and pulling in thoughts and beliefs and problems and solutions and past and futures, when all that just settles, over time, then you'll just naturally become interested in the nature of presence itself, and the nature of sound and sensation, and the visual display of colors and so forth. Oh, and you also do a lot of shadow work in between too, usually. Everyone's different though. So don't solidify any of these pointers and say like, oh, I haven't had it exactly like that, so I'm not at this stage yet or something. It doesn't really work like that. People do things in different orders, and so for some people the shadow work is super heavy. Some people it's lighter. For some people they may not even necessarily call it shadow work. It just processes differently. I can tell you one pointer about that space though: shadow work, emotion work, repressed emotion, exploring hidden beliefs, resistance patterns, reactivity, all of that work. The one very, very simple pointer I can give you that will make it far easier, and I know this from watching people, is people that resist it the most have by far the most trouble. People who are just open to like, I want to see everything. I want to feel everything. I want to process everything. I want to see all my beliefs. I want to feel all my emotions. I want feedback on my emotions and my beliefs. I want, someone who's just open to like just seeing it. They usually move through it much, much better. I find fighting it, not a good idea. Bypassing it, not a good idea. Disassociating and all that, it gets really, really, really painful. It can get really toxic. So a willingness to just go where this process is going to take you, realizing it's going to take you to some places you're really glad to be taken, and it's going to take you to some places you weren't glad to be taken and that you didn't know you had to go. But just like it's kind of flexibility and openness and willingness to see what you're being shown, and it will surprise you, and that's great. That's sometimes the shadow is something that's like a huge gift to you. Actually, it's just you hadn't seen it. That's why it's the shadow. You're overlooking a gold mine of something that's available to you that through conditioning you just learn to overlook or avoid or not see or not notice or not incorporate into your life. So again, just be open to whatever is presented and whatever is being shown to you, however it's being shown to you, and realize every situation, every person, everything you encounter, every challenge really is the universe showing you reality. If you're willing to just shift your focus enough to see it right, which means put the lens down. The more rigid we are with our lens, with our view, with our inherent view, the harder all this is. The more we're just willing to see, okay, what's actually happening? How can I look at this slightly differently? Ask for help with that, get feedback. Inquire, what is the belief here? What am I holding on to? What am I not wanting to see? What am I trying to exert my will to force the world to do for me right now? What am I wanting to be the case that's just obviously not the case, right? And that happens all the time. Frustration. What is frustration? Frustration is saying, what's happening right now is what I don't think should be happening right now. You ever going to win that battle? You're ever going to win the battle with reality that you want it to be what it's not? You'll never win, ever. You just can't win that one. So what you can do is say, oh, let me just see what's actually happening, and maybe it's a bigger gift than if I were to actually get quote unquote rewarded with what I think should be happening. There's this old saying that's like, when God wants to punish you, he answers your prayers. You ever heard that? kind of like that. Okay, we can ring the bell. Talk's over. Get out.